Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. I'm Glenn Kraig of Free From Broke, and I'm your moderator tonight. Here are the minds that make up the Money Mastermind Show. We have Miranda Marquit from Planting Money Seeds, Peter Anderson of Bible Money Matters, and Tom Drake of Canadian Finance Blog. We have one missing today. That's Kyle Prevost of youngandthrifty.ca. He couldn't make the show tonight, but he is usually part of our panel. We also have a special guest tonight, Kraig Mathias of Create My Independence. Welcome, Kraig.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Today's topic is all about extreme savings. Is it for you? Before we go into that, I want to mention for those watching live, we have a Q&A app that's on our Google Events page, so feel free to stop by there and ask questions about extreme savings on the Hangouts page, and we'd be happy to feature your questions, so please go ahead and do that. So, savings. Let me list this out here. According to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, the average U.S. savings rate from 1959 to 2014 is 6.82%. That's average over all of those years, so obviously there were highs and lows in between. For comparison, the latest data has the savings rate at 4.8%. Now, from about 1959 through the 70s, it was mostly double-digit savings. And just before the Great Recession in 2008, the savings rate hovered around 2 and 3%. So you can see we've had savings all over the place. We've saved a lot. We've saved a little bit. So before we get into the subject of extreme savings, I think maybe we should just talk for some people, why even save it all? You know, why put your money into savings? Why save? Why not just spend? Why not utilize all your money somehow else? So Kraig, you're our guest. Why save it all?
It's a great question, Glenn. I think the times are changing. It's the Industrial Revolution started 100 years ago or whatever, and people had secure jobs. They had jobs for 40 years. They had companies that really took care of them. Things are changing a lot with this new economy, with the internet, and kind of the old factory type job is getting shipped overseas, and things are a lot less secure than they ever were in the last 100 years at least, when it comes to the stability of someone taking care of you. And really now I think it's every man for himself these days. You really have to, like Dave Ramsey says, you have to go out and kill something and drag it home. And that's really what it's coming to these days. So a lot more risk, and you have to be more responsible for bringing in value in the marketplace. And I think that's why you need to save, because you need to be prepared for potentially a layoff or a job change or a career change, because we're doing that a lot more now these days than our parents or grandparents did.
Yeah, I think those days of the pension at the regular company, they're pretty much done, right? I mean, unless you're in the government sector, it's really tough to have a pension job, knowing that you're going to have that money coming to you at some point. You know, in the days of spending 20, 30 years at one company and being loyal to them, I mean, how many jobs do they say people are going to have these throughout their lifetimes? A good number of them, right? They're going to jump every few years.
7 to 10 was the last number I saw, was 7 to 10 career changes.
That's a lot. So savings helps you there, right? Because when you have money in savings, you have a cushion, and that cushion, that gives you some freedom. It gives you freedom to choose. You're not stuck in one place. You're not stuck in one bad job or one location. You have some flexibility when you have that extra money. So
exactly.
Besides just having savings, how does that differ from extreme savings? So what is extreme savings all about? Kraig, if you mind.
Yeah, no problem. I think the traditional savings kind of way of thinking is, hey, we're going to save, like you said, the average rate right now is 4.8%. We're going to save the 4.8% from the time we enter the marketplace at 22, 23 until we're 65, 67 years old, and then we're going to retire at that point. But the condition there is that you're going to have consistent income. It's going to be, you're going to be working 40, 50 hours a week, whether or not you like your job, for, 45 years, and that's the traditional path. But I think what the condition there is 45 years of a lot of sweat there at saving 4.8%. That's the traditional kind of path of saving. Extreme saving says, hey, 4.8% is for wusses. There's absolutely no reason why you need to spend 93.2% or no 95.2% of your income. There's absolutely no reason why you need to spend that. I'm terrible at math, especially under pressure. Extreme saving means
that's a good
you can do better than that. And the reason is because then you don't have to do that. You don't have to comply with the traditional path if you don't want to. You can take a career change that maybe doesn't make a super ton of financial sense over the short term. You can afford to. Nowadays, I think a lot more people are deciding, hey, family's more important than a career is. So my sister, for example, she's staying home with her kids, with my nephews. And I think more and more people are going back to that because I think family's just more important than that. And I think if you actually want to stay home with your kids, if you want to have a parent home with the kids, or you want to make a career change, extreme savings is really the only way you're going to be able to do that. If you save in 4.8% per year, you can forget about it, in my opinion. You can forget about staying home with your kids.
That's
so
interesting
here's
point.
the question for you guys. What exactly is extreme savings? I mean, when you look online, you hear a lot of different things. Saving anything more than the normal of 5 to 10%, or even up to 15 or 20% would be normal. But some people say over 20% is extreme saving. But others say 50 to 60% is, and then there's still others who say 78 to 80% is possible, and that's what you should be doing if you're an extreme saver. So, what do you guys see as extreme saving?
I think anytime I get into the point where I'm sacrificing something I don't want to sacrifice, then I'm into extreme savings. But we all know where I stand on saving and spending. But yeah, I mean, I personally think that once you get beyond the 50% mark, you're probably moving into extreme territory. When you're getting into the point where you're saving 50% of your income, I think that's when you start moving into extreme territory.
So what kind of sacrifice is needed for extreme savings? I mean, obviously most people, look, if somebody asked Warren Buffett, can you save 50% of your money, he might say, yeah, it's not a problem. I'm making billions, so if I could save half of it. But for the average person, 25, 50%, any more than that, it's really, really hard. I mean, obviously the average is 4.8%, and there's going to be lower than that and some higher than that. That's the average. So that money's not all going on just extra stuff. Some people are just kind of struggling to get by. So what kind of sacrifices does it take to start extreme saving?
I think you have to be out of debt, or at least the majority of you have to be out of consumer debt, maybe outside of the house. For the most part, I've seen some guys saving some tons of money and they still have some debt, but really debt can crush your ability to save, because if you have all of your additional money, let's say you have 25% of your income tied up in debt payments, there's just no way that you can get ahead. You're basically going to be paying those, and I guess some people count that as saving. Some people count paying off debt as saving, but over the long term, if you're paying a lot on debt, you're going to get rid of it. So I would say that getting out of debt, first of all, really sets you up to be able to save a lot of your income. That's number one, and then number two, you have to be making a decent amount of money. I mean, it takes a baseline number of dollars to live. That depends on where you live in the country, but I live in, same with Peter there, we live in the suburbs of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I've personally, I've got by on $20,000 a year, and I think that's about bare bones for living on your own here in this area. So, and I know some places there's no way you could live on that. In Washington, D.C. or New York City, there's just no way. Southern California. But there are areas of the country as well that maybe more rural areas where you could probably get by on maybe 15 easily. So that's as a single person, you know, as a family, you're gonna maybe double that or whatever. So you know, you kind of figure out your baseline expenses, and then you have to make enough in income to be able to save half of that. And so that's you know, you have to be able to do that first of all. So if you're not making enough, you got to focus on that first and get yourself out of debt. And then I think it's a matter of prioritizing, cutting out things that are money drains. A lot of people talk about the big three: housing, transportation, and food. And I think those are where the majority of your expenses go in a year. So that if you focus on those and get those down, cut out eating out, live in a moderate place. If your goal is to extreme save, live in a place that isn't sucking all your money, and maybe not drive the brand new car every 4 years, because that'll kill your expenses and savings rate too.
I think that's a great point you make about getting out of debt first also, because it's just not being efficient with your money. When you have something like credit card debt, you're paying interest on it. So you not only are you paying that money back, but you could be paying up to 20% or more as a surcharge just to have that money out there, as well as any other types of debt and loans that you might have, be it student, cars, housing, and such. So I mean, I think that's a really great point that most people, whether they even want to consider extreme debt, and maybe if they're just considering their finances in general, is to really just look towards the debt first and then see where else they can go.
Yeah, and that's how I did it too. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, you made a good point also about finding what your baseline is, your baseline expenses. And I think one problem is a lot of people they consider things like cable TV and a gym membership and other things like that to be a part of their baseline. And if a lot of those things, if you're going to have all those as part of your baseline expenses, it's going to be tough to be an extreme saver, just because they're small amounts here and there, but they add up to likely hundreds of dollars in your budget every month. That's a lot of money that you could be saving. So if you're going to be an extreme saver, I think you're probably going to have to consider having a lower standard of living to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I think like Kraig was saying, where you have to be able to make enough to save also. Besides just having the money, it's going to be a sacrifice, right? If you're making a lot of money, it's easy to save. But at some point, if you're looking to change things up and increase those savings, you have to look for those places and the places that you could cut back. And you have to start really analyzing the difference between a need and a want, which I think is difficult. That's I think where it hurts for a lot of people. We don't want to give up all the premium cable channels and the shows that are on Sunday nights or all the other goodies that are out there, and that's where it gets hard.
It just comes down to priorities, and I think you got to start there. Is there something you want in your life more than all these things? And if the answer is no, then just forget it. Because you're not going to be able to save 50% of your income. If these things are that important to you, the cable TV and the gym membership and stuff, your hobbies, that cost a lot of money. If those are more important to you than, say, a career change or having one of the parents stay home with the kid, or in my case, start a business, if all the luxuries of life are more important to you than something like that, then there's no need. You're not going to be able to do this, because it's going to take huge sacrifice, and you need to really put things like that on a huge priority in your life. It's coming from me. You really have to double down. It's not easy to save half your income.
Sometimes people don't even realize the difference between needs and wants. I've talked to so many people that, I need to have this $100 cable package, or I need a brand new car every 3 years, and those are the kind of that confusion about needs and wants will certainly stop them from ever getting any real savings.
And I think part of it too is it's not just about needs and wants. It's about what Kraig was saying too about what's important to you, because how many of us have talked about in the past how we have things that we think are okay in our house, or things that we think, might be kind of nice, but they're not things that, really enhance our quality of living, that really make us feel good, that really fulfill us. And so I think that has to be part of your discussion of needs and wants as well as I heard once somebody say, you have to look at good, better, and best. Because sometimes it's not really just about needs and wants, but sometimes you have to parse it out to, well, what would be good, what would be better, and what would be best in my life, and kind of, look at that too as you start deciding how much you want to set aside and what's really important to you.
Yeah, well, I was reading a post on the site earlyretirementextreme.com, and Jacob over there, he talks about simplifying his life, basically. He talks about how he still was able to live relatively comfortably while saving up to 70 or 80% of his income in some years. So while he didn't cut out everything, he minimized his possessions, and typically when he would buy something, it was something that was a quality item that would last him over time. Mm-hmm. And he would only really buy these things when he really needed them. So basically, he simplified everything down to about 2 big suitcases. That was basically everything he really needed to live. He had some stuff beyond that as well, but after doing that simplification, he really didn't buy much of anything except for a few quality items here and there. So it's another way to look at it as well, buying quality things, but not buying quantity of things.
Yeah, there was a time before our son was born, and we were trying to save a little bit more, so we were cutting back here and there, and we did find, it was it was a sacrifice. There were some things we had to give up, but it also ends up being, simplification is not just in your finances, it's also just in your household in general. When you don't have all this stuff, you don't have to worry about storing it all, you don't have to worry about replacing it all or keeping up with it or cleaning it. It sometimes is a little bit easier to cut back on all the stuff that you buy, and you realize, what, maybe I'm not very much worse for wear by not having it. So what is initially is the sacrifice ends up not being much of a sacrifice. It ends up being something of a lifestyle improvement too. Kraig, I think you had mentioned this earlier. Extreme savings that could lead to early retirement. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. And I'm not even. There's no need for me to reinvent the wheel here. You can go to MrMoneyMustache.com to learn all about why. But yeah, the thing about lowering your overall expenses per year, and step one, for everybody, I'm sure you guys have talked about it, but track your finances first of all. To be able to realize what's possible, you have to track your finances and know what your baseline is every year. And a good rule of thumb, all the experts are really kind of agreeing on a 4% withdrawal rate of your assets every year, and you really would never, according to most people, you wouldn't run out of money. So you basically can withdraw 4% of your assets. And a good way to calculate that is you take your expenses in a year. Let's say if it's $20,000, you multiply that by 25, and that'll give you the number. So I think, what's 25 times 20? Isn't that's 450,000? Correct? I hope. So what that means is that if you have $450,000 saved or in investments, ideally it's 500,000. Okay, sorry, I can't do math. 500,000. You could live forever on 20,000 a year. So what's cool about that is the lower you go with your yearly expenses, the lower amount it takes, and it's pretty drastic too. So like for instance, if you get by on $10,000 a year, which is super extreme. I mean, we're talking about that Jacob from Early Retirement Extreme. Like, I think he spent about that. And at that level, you only have to have $250,000, and you never have to earn another dollar again. So it really has to do with how much you spend, and it exponentially decreases the amount of money that you'll need to pay out your income, because you don't need as much income, so you need a ton of money less. And there's all kinds of stuff out there. I believe that on Mr. Money Mustache's site, he's got a post that says if you save 50% of your income starting today, you could have enough money saved in 12 years, if I think that's right, to pay your expenses for the rest of your life. Normally, I think it's at 10% savings, it takes you like 40 or 50 years to get there. So really what we're saying here is at 4.8% savings rate, you'll never have enough money to cover your expenses. Basically, we'll never get there. So good thing there's Social Security and stuff, and Social Security will have to be there because people will be on the street if it's not.
Well, and even with Social Security, I mean, it was never meant to be an income replacement. So if you're relying on Social Security and you're 4.8%, you're still screwed. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you really are.
I mean, and that's part of my motivation is that
we're not living in Canada here.
yeah.
Some of us are.
Yeah, some of it. I believe in extreme saving just so that I can get there. Whether or not it's at 40, 50, or 60, or even 70, I want to get there. I want to get to the point where I'm financially set, and I know just by doing math that I'm never going to get there at 4.8%. I don't think the majority of Americans know that. They're never going to get there, you know?
Yeah, well, the EBRI does their regular survey, and they found that less than half of Americans have even done a retirement needs assessment. So yeah, like you said, most Americans aren't even looking at what they might need. They haven't even looked at the numbers to see what they might need to do to even come close.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a lot of people that have been able to retire early, so I know it's possible. I'm not really necessarily under the mindset that should always be the goal. I really believe that if you're motivated enough to retire early, actually, Tim Ferriss says this in his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. He says, if you're the type of person that's going to save 60% of your income for 10 years or whatever, and you're 45 years old, and you never have to work a day in your life again, you quit the corporate job, you're going to be bored to tears. And he says, you're going to want to stick bicycle spokes in your eyes. That's what Tim Ferriss says, and I believe him. I mean, that kind of person is going to, if they're that motivated to save, they're going to want to keep doing things. So I don't think the goal necessarily has to be, hey, I don't ever want to work again. I think it's a matter of being able to work on things maybe that you enjoy a little bit more, or maybe on your terms, you know?
And I think we need to make a distinction here for people who are maybe following along and they're not really getting this out of the conversation here. But when we talk about extreme savings, I mean, we're talking about money that we're taking out of our income, that we're putting it away. But this isn't money that we're necessarily putting into quote unquote savings. We're not talking about necessarily putting 50% of your paycheck into a savings account per se. Like, we're doing other things with this money in order to let it grow, right?
I think it depends what your goal is. If your goal is to do something with it in 20 years, then yes, put it into a long-term investment. If your goal is to do something with it in a couple of years, maybe it just goes in the savings account. And I've used both strategies. I've used the savings account a lot because my goals have been shorter term. So I think it just depends how long-term your goals are. But yeah, definitely put it somewhere where it can grow, if it's a long-term investment.
So, I mean, like I said, that's important for people to understand that savings doesn't necessarily mean that you're not investing, that you're not putting it in other places, you're not letting your money do other things for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about people out there who, maybe they're thinking about saving, maybe they hear this and they go, extreme saving. Okay, that's interesting. I get what you're saying, but look, it's just not fun. Like, I want to enjoy myself now. I want to go on next Caribbean vacation. I want to watch cable. I mean, those things are fun. They just want to enjoy the now. I want to live in the moment. What do you tell people there? I mean, obviously you can't always change people's minds, and people are going to do what they're going to do. But what about for those people? What's the argument for them? Is there an argument for them?
Yeah, I think you got to go back to what's important in their life. You got to figure out what's important to them. Where are they in the stage of life? Are they at a point where maybe they'd want to spend time with their family at some point, spend more time? What is it that they're unhappy with in their life, and see if there's, what are they dreaming that they could do? So I say stuff about staying home with your family, but I also say stuff like starting a business or changing careers and doing something that you enjoy a lot more. I know there's things that we all kind of wish were different and were better, and I think you got to focus on those. And I think it's kind of coming to terms with the fact that you could make that happen. And this is a way that you can get there. This is a way that you can make that happen in your life. And I think if you can see that end goal, like, hey, in 5 years I want to go down, I want to switch down to part-time, or I want to switch over to this job that's going to pay me a lot less, but I'm going to be so much more happy. I think you got to keep that end goal in mind and remember it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sacrifice. If there's something out there that you want bad enough, you're going to be able to sacrifice for it.
And here's another question for you: can extreme savings go too far? Does it get too much when you start trying to save as much as possible? Does it become just a game and without a purpose, or can it have any detrimental effects to try to save that much that maybe you should be spending money in other places?
Yeah,
I think there's people that can definitely take it too far. I'm sorry. I was reading some of these posts about people doing these extreme savings things, doing things like turning their heat way down in the winter, so that they're basically having to wear a winter coat in their house in the middle of winter. Things like that, or they're not using toilet paper; they use a cloth to wipe their rear end. Or
it's like that show on TV, right? The
extreme cheapskates or whatever. People can take it way too far and get way overboard with it. One place I think, especially, is if you're married and you have kids and you're bringing them along for this journey of extreme saving. It can be tough if they're not totally on board with the whole deal. Maybe they don't want to have to sacrifice, the cable TV, or maybe they don't want to have to eat a different kind of food that's cheaper, or they don't want to live in a cold house in the winter and wear their winter coat in the house. So I think that can be a definite downside, especially when you have a family and they're not on board with the whole plan.
Does anybody have any ideas on how you can help get your family on board? Because that is a tough thing. I mean, I know you say you don't want to keep up with the Joneses yourself, but when you have kids and you're living out in the suburbs and everybody's doing this, that, and the other thing, it's hard to tell your kids, what, you're not going to do this and everybody else is doing it. It's hard to get everybody on board in the same thing. So what can we do to try to get everybody there in the same vision?
Well, I get some. I remember some shows on the Dave Ramsey show where this has been covered, where kids and whole families have yelled the debt-free scream on. I used to do it on Fridays, but kids were really into it a lot of times, and I think what happened is the parents told the kids that, hey, mommy and daddy want to get themselves out of debt so that they can be happier, or so that we can do this as a family. So maybe mom or dad can stay home with you guys and be there when you get home from school and stuff, and then we're going to be able to do a lot more things as a family. I think you can communicate really well with your kids from that angle. At least I've seen that happen, and the kids are super on board and supportive. And I just don't think you can sacrifice forever. Maybe for a little while, short-term thing, in order to make something happen, because kids don't really understand. I don't think they understand sacrificing for 5 years. It's too long for them. But maybe a year, if the goal's big enough. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think one thing that is, like you said, you got to talk to them. You have to really be honest with them and get everybody on the same page by just saying, this is what we're going to do, this is what our plan is, and this is why we're doing it. It's probably a rare thing for a lot of families to sit down and say, you know what, this is what we do with money and this is why we do it. The reason why we didn't go out and buy a new car when such and such happened was because we want to do this, or the reason why we maybe didn't do this is because we need the money to do this instead. So just being at least somewhat honest about it helps people know what the plan is.
Exactly.
My boys actually help out looking for sales and stuff like that when we go grocery shopping. If they'll actually look at something that they want, and they've actually said, "Oh, we can't get that; it's not on sale." So that if you keep them involved in that kind of stuff, they can pick it up. Now, granted, they're young. Once they're in their teens, maybe they're not going to go for that so much when they can't get that $100 pair of jeans or something like that. But we'll cross that bridge in a few years.
I think. Go ahead, Miranda.
one of the things that my parents did for us when we were teenagers, once we got to that point, was, specifically tell each of us kids, this is how much money you're going to get for whatever it is, whether it's back to school shopping or anything. They said, this is how much money you're going to get. You decide what you're going to get with it. And since I've never been really fashionable or, into brands, it was easy for me to take this money and get a whole wardrobe for my whole school year. My sister had to have name brands, though, and after 1 or 2 items, it was over. It was done. And she had a couple of really nice things, but the rest of it she had to pay for herself. And I think, putting that money in your kids' hands and saying, here, make some decisions with it, can kind of help them a little bit as well.
I think another thing too is, as parents, you have to be the first ones to set the example too. You can't sit there buying something extravagant for yourself and then telling the kids that they can't have the new Xbox, and that when you just bought a luxury car, So you have to kind of be in it with them and really do it. And I think the other thing too is you can say no. The kids don't have to have everything. It doesn't kill them to not have everything. I think sometimes as a parent, I want to buy them stuff more than they even want the stuff. My wife says I cause more trouble than they do. I'll see a toy and say, hey, look at this. Isn't that cool? And then go, damn, now they want that. But sometimes you do just have to say, no, you can't have it, and that's that, and you leave it at that. So I think those are some things that you get everybody on board with. We talked a little bit about some places that people can start saving, but let's maybe kind of devote a little bit of a section here to how a person could get to start saving on an extreme basis. Where are places they could look? What type of mindset are they going to have to put themselves into? Maybe just some general tips for people on how they can start extreme savings.
Well, I would say that the place to start is tracking your finances, and my favorite tool for that is mint.com. But I am aware that not everybody is going to be able to use that, because for that to be a great tool, I think your all of your bank accounts, credit card accounts, loan accounts, you want to make sure that they can sync up with all those accounts. So in my case, all of my accounts sync with Mint. If all your accounts sync with mint.com, I would definitely recommend using that, because it's a free tool and it's automated. So it will download all your stuff, and it's super easy to track, and it's going to be easier than tracking your stuff manually. So, but if you can't use Mint, then definitely find a way to track your finances. And that'll give you the baseline to know, okay, first of all, how much are you saving today? Where's all your money going every month? And a lot of cases, I think a lot of people will find that they're spending all of their money every month. And that's going to be the place to start, is figuring out where your money is going. Because if you don't have that knowledge, how are you ever gonna really change? You got to measure what's going on today in order to be able to make adjustments.
And I think
if you can measure it, you can manage it, right?
Exactly.
And that's a good point, because I've seen the figures that say that the average household wastes between 10% and 15% of its income each month. So if you can track it, like what Kraig says, and even just identify that 10 to 15% you're probably just throwing away, I think that's a great place to start. Is start with those things.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I remember back when we just first started tracking our expenses, we used something called You Need a Budget, which is another great tool for doing that. And we found that we thought we were doing pretty well at the time. And once we started tracking, however, we found that we were wasting so much money on eating out every month. I mean, it was literally hundreds of dollars was going down the tubes because we were eating out, several times a week. So when we started tracking, we found that out. We were able to, rein that in a bit. We didn't stop going out to eat altogether, but we cut it back quite a bit, and it literally saved us hundreds of dollars just in that one line item. So when you start tracking your entire budget, you're probably going to find several areas like that you're able to cut back in without too much pain, too.
I think along those same lines, just like you shouldn't be afraid to say no to your kids, you also shouldn't be afraid to not be one of the Joneses. I think we sometimes spend, we don't even want the things, but we just don't want to be that one kooky one in the neighborhood that doesn't have the brand new car or the whatever it is. And sometimes it's okay to just be like, you know what, we didn't go on a 2-week vacation because, we just don't have the money for it this time. And, don't worry about what other people are thinking about it. And I think we worry too much about that sometimes.
Agreed.
So besides Kraig, has anybody here done anything close to extreme savings? Or, obviously it doesn't have to be long-term, but are there any instances in which you have?
Well,
No.
I haven't, but I can say, I mean, part of my aversion to, saying, well, I'm going to put away like 50% of my income or whatever, is because I do enjoy, living life now. And basically what we did was we went down and we said, what do we need to have to make it happen for us to put away money for retirement or, our equivalent of retirement? Neither my husband nor I ever really want to like stop working and do nothing. We always want to be doing something interesting. But we said, well, what do we need to put away later on in life, so that we can live comfortably? And then what do we need to do now for putting away in terms of, kind of a rainy day fund, which, as we know, I use a taxable account for the most part. And so we started from that point and said, well, what do we need to do with that? And it does not amount to 50% of our income. So we don't say 50% of our income. We just don't. And we go ahead and do the things that we enjoy doing with our life now. And I think it's really more about freedom. And part of the reason I think in those terms is because when we lived in Syracuse, New York, and we were both in grad school, we were turning down our heat and wearing coats around the house. We were doing that. We were those people. But we did it because of necessity, because we didn't have any money. So even then, we weren't setting aside 50%. We were just trying to survive. And that kind of put me out of this, well, if I don't have to sacrifice, I'm not going to. So, this is what we need to make our future secure. This is what we need to ensure that we have a level of freedom to pursue what we want. And we kind of go from there. So it's not really about 50% or 20% or whatever of our income. It's more about this is what we need to be financially, free and for the most part, and do mostly what we want.
We've never been great extreme savers by any means, but especially right now. But the reason is because we have cut all our expenses because my wife stays at home with our kids. And
you have two now.
Yeah. once they go to school, once they're both in grade 1 and beyond, my wife plans on going back to work. So without changing our lifestyle at this point, when we get there, we could probably save 30 to 50% just by the fact of her going back to work. So we're hoping to do that. Hopefully we won't take advantage too much of the extra money, but it's the goal is that we actually can save quite a bit just by having that second income again.
Yeah, and
I was going to say.
Go ahead, Peter.
I don't typically extreme save, but we have gone through different times where we have done the extreme saving. For example, last year when we bought a house, for a year or 2 years before that, we were saving a lot of our income towards that down payment on the house. We did the 20% down payment on the house, so that's a lot of money when you're spending $300,000 on a house. So for a couple of years there, we had cut everything back, and we were basically saving every extra penny. So after that, however, we've kind of done more of a balance now, where we're still saving enough for our future plans and so forth, but we're not sacrificing everything now. We're still paying for things for our son to go to swim class and other activities like that. So it's kind of a balance.
I think Tom reminded me of a good point for saving, and that is when you do start making more money, be it through a raise or a second income, don't get caught up in lifestyle inflation. We have a tendency, you start making more money and you start spending more money, and then you get used to that lifestyle, so it becomes that much more difficult to start taking away. So if you could find ways that when you get that raise or that extra income, that you can just automatically have it siphoned off into savings somewhere, that makes that lifestyle all that much easier to stay in. For myself, years ago before my son was born, I had mentioned that we had saved a lot, and basically we knew that we wanted my wife to stay home with my son for a while, and we just started going through ways to cut things, and we stopped eating out, we cut out the cable, we just did a whole bunch of stuff, and we got it down to the point where we were basically living off of her income until my son was born and banking mine, and that allowed us time so that when she was out of work we had extra money. And the funny thing was that because we cut all these different things out, when we were living off of only the one income and we weren't saving one income because my wife wasn't working, it wasn't that much different because we didn't really miss those things that we cut out so much. Granted, when you have a kid, you're not going to eat out and go out to the movies anyway, so it's kind of safe there too. But after we did all that stuff, it wasn't that hard to keep it going. So, okay, we've gone through a lot in extreme savings here, and I think we've talked a lot about how people can do it and where they can start, and as well as the benefits and how it can really improve a person's lifestyle if you at least just consider where you could be putting your money and where it could be better be used. So what I'd like to do now is wrap up, and let's just have a final word on extreme savings from everybody here. And we'll start with Tom. Tom, what are your final words on extreme savings?
I think the biggest thing you can do really is cut the expenses so that you have the money to save. It's all the obvious stuff like cutting any of your bills where you can, not having the big car payment. Any of that stuff that's monthly will really add up for some actual savings.
And Tom, what are your final words? Peter.
What's Tom? Oh, okay. Me.
I'm sitting here. I'm looking at one icon, and then I'm thinking about the other. It's hard moderating. You guys listening out there and watching, you think it's easy. It's not. It's hard. Go ahead, Peter.
All right. My final word is this: if you're going to go down the road of doing extreme savings, the first thing you got to really figure out is where your money is going, what's coming in, what's going out. So start a budget. Find your problem areas. Find areas that you can cut, especially like Tom said, and those recurring monthly expenses, because that adds up over time. Save yourself an emergency fund buffer, and then start putting your savings and investments on autopilot if you can. Get it automatic so you don't have to think about it and it's just coming out, because that way that money isn't there to start with, and you don't have to think about it every month. You get used to it. So just go down that path, revisit and revise your budget and your plan on a regular basis, and go from there.
And we should also note that our last episode was all about automating your finances. So if you haven't watched or listened to that one, make sure you do that as well. Miranda, what are your final words on extreme savings?
You don't have to do it. No.
I like it.
So really it comes down to what is important to you, what do you want your life to look like, and what do you need to do with your money to get there. And once you figure that out, then you can decide whether you need to go to the extreme with your savings or whether, something a little less extreme will be adequate to, your desires.
And Kraig, as our guest tonight, if you could wrap this up, what's your final words on extreme savings?
Well, Miranda took mine, so
so sorry.
I was gonna say, figure out if you want to do extreme saving in the first place. Don't just assume that everybody should do it. I think it just comes down to priority. If you are happy with everything the way it is right now, and you don't want to make a big change in your life, that extreme saving is going to allow you to do. You don't want to quit working at 45, then maybe you don't want to do extreme saving, because it is a ton of work and it's a big sacrifice. So figure that out in the first place if it makes sense for you, and if what your priorities are. What do you want your life to look like?
Thanks a lot, Kraig, and thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for letting us pick your brain and for all of your insight. For those out there who have not yet gone to Create My Independence, can you tell us a little bit about your site and about where we can find you on the web and what you're all about?
Yeah, you bet. So I've got the blog at createmyindependence.com, and I've also got a podcast. You can find that at that same URL, and it's on iTunes. And I put out an episode of that every week. It's mainly about both my journey and also just about around the theme of being able to set yourself up so that you can do what is really important to you, and so creating independence so that you're independent from any kind of being trapped somewhere, being stuck in a job you don't like, or in a situation in your life that you're unhappy with. So it's all about creating the ability to go out and do what you want to do. So I've done that through saving. Like we've talked about the show, I did extreme saving. I saved over half my income for many years, and that put me in a position to be able to go and kind of change my direction and do some pretty crazy things like quitting my job and starting a business. So I talk about the journey, but I also share my tips and my best stuff for how to do that as well if you want to make a similar change in your life.
And that's createmyindependence.com, correct?
Correct, yep.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us at the Money Mastermind Show. Make sure you follow our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast in iTunes and in Stitcher, and check out our site at moneymastermindshow.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter. Make sure you get all of our latest articles on top of our shows. We have other articles there that talk about it, so get in on our newsletter. And if you love our shows and our podcast, leave us a review. We love reviews. And we want to hear comments too. So put your comment in a review, shoot us an email, leave it on our articles. We want to hear from you, the audience. And until next week, be good with your money. Good night, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Google+.